My son emptied my bank account and flew to Rome with his wife and her mother. I didn't shout or cry. I just sat there, quietly, and deep inside, I understood something had changed forever. Ellie Price, a woman close to 70, stared at the message on her phone. Her savings were gone. She checked the balance again and again, hoping she had read wrong, but the screen kept showing the same cold number, 0. All the money she had worked for since she was a teenager, all the hours spent scrubbing floors and cleaning other people's homes, had vanished. When she called the bank, the workers told her the cash had been moved online, more than $80,000. Every penny had been sent to an account under her son's name. Ellie couldn't speak. She ended the call and sat in silence, listening to the old clock ticking in the kitchen. A few minutes later, her neighbor Doris called, excited as always. She asked if Ellie had seen her son's posts online. He was in Rome, wearing a bright smile, eating fancy meals with his wife, Tanya, and Tanya's mother. Ellie searched for the pictures. There he was, laughing, drinking, looking proud. The caption said, "A new start. I earned this." His wife commented with a money emoji, thanking her own mother. They didn't mention Ellie at all. Still, Ellie didn't break down. She held the phone, breathed slowly, and gave a small smile. Not of joy, but of clarity. She finally saw her son for who he had become. While Ellie tried to stay steady, her son enjoyed Rome. Tanya bragged about taking the money, saying Ellie was old and would not need it. Her mother laughed along. Jackson stayed quiet, but something uneasy moved in him. He didn't know that Tanya planned to leave him when she opened another account in Spain. He heard her talking on the phone about it one night. The words hit him like cold water, but he said nothing. Back home in Los Angeles, Ellie began to change. She made tea, picked up her old notebook, and wrote that her silence would speak louder than any words. She remembered her hard childhood, working at 14, raising a son by herself, giving him everything she could, even selling family land so he could study. She remembered every insult from Tanya, every time she was pushed aside, every moment her son ignored her. Later that night, something unexpected happened. Jackson's phone buzzed with the warning from his bank. His own account had been frozen because of suspicious activity. He didn't understand it yet, but Ellie had already started taking steps to protect herself. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't begging, she was calm, thinking carefully. A mother with nothing left to lose becomes someone unrecognizable, someone strong, patient, and ready. Pain doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, and Ellie was done waiting. People often say a mother holds on too tightly, but Tanya twisted that idea and made it sound like Ellie was some burden who refused to let her child grow. Tanya told Jackson that Ellie's care was nothing but hidden guilt and that women like her used their struggles as an excuse to stay in their children's lives forever. Jackson listened, unsure, but he allowed Tanya to shape his thoughts one small step at a time. Soon, Tanya decided when they would visit Ellie and when they wouldn't. First, she said they were overwhelmed. Then she said it was better to meet outside the house. Later, she refused to step into Ellie's home because it smelled old. Jackson agreed every time. Each time Ellie asked why she saw him less, he dropped his gaze and muttered excuses about work or wedding plans. Ellie didn't argue. She watched, she listened, and she understood more than they imagined. Rhonda, Tanya's mother, joined the quiet contempt. She never insulted Ellie directly, but she used polished words that cut deeper than open cruelty. She suggested Ellie move to a better area, implying Ellie's neighborhood was beneath them. Ellie simply stared at her, saying nothing, but inside she felt something close, something final. It was no longer about distance. They simply didn't want her in their world. One Sunday, during a family lunch Tanya planned, Ellie finally spoke to Jackson alone. She waited for Tanya to be distracted and for Rhonda to step away. When the moment came, Ellie asked softly, "Son, are you sure she's right for you? Have you noticed how she behaves, how she treats you, how she treats me?" But before Jackson could answer, Tanya reappeared, and the room tensed. Jackson burst out, accusing Ellie of being jealous and afraid of losing her place in his life. Ellie didn't defend herself. She simply lowered her eyes to her plate, feeling the truth settle inside her. She had lost him. She went home, removed her shoes like a visitor in her own life, and sat on the bed thinking about the last time Jackson had told her he loved her without being asked. She couldn't recall it. Days passed, and Tanya tightened her influence. She visited Jackson at work, brought him food, talked about investments, and convinced him to give her full access to his finances. Jackson agreed, blinded by desire and confusion. But Ellie didn't sit quietly. She turned to Brenda, a retired accountant who lived nearby. Brenda taught her how to read bank statements on her phone, how to check transfers, and how to understand debits. When Ellie finally saw the list of withdrawals, her stomach twisted. The dates matched moments Jackson had visited or asked for documents. Brenda showed her forged signatures and explained the fraud. Ellie felt her heart sink, but she didn't cry. Instead, she recorded everything carefully in a notebook. Every withdrawal, every date, every amount. Meanwhile, in Rome, Jackson began noticing Tanya's distance. She no longer touched him the same way. She spent hours on her phone. Rhonda barely hid her irritation. One night, she overheard them planning to leave him as soon as they returned home. He didn't move, pretending to be asleep, but something inside him cracked. For the first time in years, he thought of his mother and her voice, the one that had always protected him. But by then, Ellie had already set her plan in motion. She froze his accounts. She reported the forgery. She contacted the right offices. And when Jackson finally called her, frightened and alone, asking what she had done, she answered calmly, "I didn't take anything from you. I only stopped you from taking more from me." Then she hung up, not out of cruelty, but because she knew he needed to learn something he had ignored for too long. Sometimes, sorrow teaches what comfort never will. She wrote the final lines with a steady hand. She told her son she held no anger towards him because her heart could not carry such bitterness. But she also explained that she was no longer the quiet parent who waited for her child to remember she existed. She had become someone who taught through truth, even if truth hurt. And she added that if he ever felt real regret, the letter would remain for him, not to rescue him, but so he could never say no one warned him. At the bottom, she drew a tiny heart, the last soft piece of love she still had. Jackson drifted around Rome without direction. He slept in cheap rooms that smelled of dust. Some days he forced himself to eat. Other days he simply kept walking. He had no one to call. Tanya ignored him. Rhonda blocked him. He knew that returning to America would not feel like coming home. It would feel like falling. Eventually, he bought a ticket back. his body shaking from shame and cold. He understood he would land to a flood of unpaid bills, not warm welcomes. While he was losing himself, Ellie was preparing for the end. Her health had worsened, yet her mind felt strangely clear. Before her treatment could take her hair, she cut it herself in the bathroom with old sewing scissors. She looked at her reflection and whispered, "Now I match my truth." Walter, her loyal friend, took her to her last appointment. The doctor explained the sickness was spreading fast. Ellie accepted the news calmly. She said she had never feared death. She only feared leaving without settling her heart. But now she felt ready. That night, lying alone, a sharp pain ran through her body. She curled up and held herself. She whispered her son's name, not to call him, but to say goodbye. She knew the calm around her was the quiet before collapse, yet she felt no terror. She had done her part. The rest would fall on Jackson. When her plane touched the ground in the United States, she felt nothing. She didn't look at the shiny airport ceilings or the crowds around her. She hadn't come to admire anything. She had come to complete a chapter. Almost 70, trembling from illness, she walked forward powered only by purpose. She had sold several belongings to afford the flight. The blender, the big mirror, and a ring she had carried since Jackson's childhood. She felt no regret. Freedom had a price, and she was willing to pay it. Walter met her at the airport. He had arrived early to prepare the documents and pull the needed strings. He arranged for Ellie to be present at the embassy when Jackson signed the forms. It wasn't required, but the official understood her situation. Walter removed his hat when she approached. She said she didn't look like someone about to confront her child. She answered he didn't look retired. When he asked if she was certain about her decision, she said being alive was enough reason. They drove in silence. She wasn't there to chat. She carried a yellow envelope in her purse, filled with old memories that held the weight of her entire life. Across the city, Jackson stared at his reflection, seeing fear and exhaustion in his eyes. He knew the signing would separate him from the accounts he had abused. It would also force him to admit the lies he had used. He would avoid prison, but his record would follow him everywhere. In the lobby, Tanya waited. She looked annoyed, wore borrowed clothing, and had no affection left. Her words were sharp, but they no longer cut him. What hurt was realizing he had allowed himself to be shaped by someone who treated him like nothing. At the embassy, he sat in a silent room. Tanya chewed gum loudly. Jackson's hands shook. Then Ellie entered. She walked slowly, but firmly, carrying the envelope. When their eyes met, Jackson stood in shock. She told him she had come not as his mother, but as a witness. Tanya laughed cruelly, but Ellie looked at her with quiet pity. Ellie said Tanya had taken everything from her but one thing, the ability to forgive. Tanya mocked her again, calling Jackson a failure. Ellie answered that he had been a good boy once, and that he had allowed himself to be changed. Jackson broke down, whispering he didn't know when he lost his way. Ellie handed him the envelope, his baby photos, his first letters, small pieces of the past he had forgotten. Inside was also the letter she had written, the one that warned him. He signed the papers. A tourist camera captured Ellie telling him that she had been her whole world, but she had never been his. The video spread online, and people admired her strength. Tanya left without looking back. Later, Ellie and Jackson walked together through a narrow Roman street. She stopped at a corner and told him this was where they would separate. He asked if she could forgive him. She told him she had already had. The real battle was his own heart. She walked away. He never saw her again. That night, he opened the envelope. When he read her letter, he collapsed, crying as he had not cried since childhood. He realized he had lost something beyond repair, the honor of a mother. He returned to America carrying only the envelope. Nothing else remained. The streets of his old neighborhood felt different now. Every corner whispered memories. Every step reminded him of what he had broken, and he carried the weight alone. She handed out candy to the children and listened closely when they shared their little stories. Peace had returned to her, even though her body grew weaker each day. The illness advanced quietly, shrinking her strength piece by piece. Her clothes no longer fit, her steps were slower, and her hands shook often, but she refused to stay in bed. She moved through her home with determination, as if walking kept her spirit alive. One Sunday, Jackson appeared at the end of the street. He carried a small bag of donuts, though he had not tasted food or slept for hours. He didn't know if he had the right to approach her, but something pushed him forward. He only wanted to make sure she was still breathing. From across the road, he saw her in the rocking chair. She wore a soft sweater and a shawl, looking fragile, yet peaceful. She smiled gently at the kids who passed by. When one child placed a small flower in her hand, she embraced him with affection. Jackson could barely swallow. He left the bag on the porch and walked away. Ellie didn't look up, but she sensed him. She didn't open the door. He came back again and again during the following weeks. He always arrived quietly, left something on the steps, and disappeared. Sometimes it was a flower, sometimes a pastry, sometimes a short message without a signature. He never knocked. He never asked for forgiveness. He simply showed up, hoping each small gesture would carry a piece of the apology he could not speak. One night, Ellie opened her red notebook and wrote her final words. Her arm trembled, but her handwriting stayed steady enough to hold her meaning. She kept the message simple. She wrote that love should be given freely and never demanded. She told him that if he had learned that, then he was no longer lost. She asked him not to search for her after she was gone, because she would exist in every choice he made with kindness. She urged him to forgive himself by helping others, and she reminded him that seeing her in another woman's eyes would be the moment he could redeem his past. She signed her letter with her full name and placed it in an envelope marked for him. The morning she passed away was filled with sunlight. The room glowed gently, as if the day itself wanted to honor her. The red notebook and the letter were on her lap, along with the blanket she had knitted years before. The neighbors found her surrounded by the flowers the children had left. Her face showed calm acceptance. No panic, no noise, only rest. Walter arrived and closed her eyes with a soft touch. He did not shed tears. He respected the way she had lived. The wake was simple, decorated with drawings, park flowers, and her favorite songs. No grand displays, only sincerity. Jackson felt the shift before anyone told him. He reached the house, walked into the room, and saw her lying still. He knelt, took her hands, and found the envelope. He read the letter in a whisper, his tears quiet as hers had always been. Nearby, he found a box with a childhood photo. On the back were the words, "I still believe in you, son." He held the picture close to his chest, then went outside and sat in her chair. Looking at the sky, he realized he had lost his mother, but might still discover the person he was meant to be. In the days that followed, neighbors said the man who brought donuts began living in the small house. He owned almost nothing. He kept her chair, the notebook, and the photo. He lived simply, filling the empty rooms with memory, regret, and the hope of redemption.